The night was cold and silent. Luke, a simple human farmer, walked back to his home after checking the fences. The wind was sharp, the stars bright, and the ground hard beneath his boots. Everything felt normal, until he heard a sound from his storage barn. It was soft like a whisper, but it didn't belong in the quiet night. He stopped and listened. There it was again, rustling, like someone moving carefully. Trying not to be caught, Luke narrowed his eyes, grabbed his old flashlight, and stepped toward the barn. His farm was on the edge of the settlement, far from the main roads. Not many people passed by, and definitely not at this hour. He pushed open the barn door slowly, the creak loud in the silence. Inside, shadows danced across the walls as the flashlight beam moved, and then he saw her. She was crouched near the food crates, her back to him, a loaf of bread in her hands, half torn and already bitten. Her clothes were dirty, torn in places, and her skin had a soft bluish hue, not human. Her silver hair hung over her face, hiding her features. She was an alien, clearly weak, thin, and shaking with cold. "Hey!" Luke shouted, his voice strong but not cruel. She froze, her whole body going stiff like a cornered animal. She didn't run, didn't fight. Instead, she turned her head slowly, and for the first time he saw her face. It wasn't anger or fear in her eyes, it was sorrow. Tears ran down her cheeks, mixing with the dirt on her skin. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Please. I didn't want to steal, but my children." Luke stood still. He didn't know what to say. He'd seen aliens before, but never like this. Not broken, not desperate, not crying in his barn, begging for food. Her knees buckled, and she fell forward, the bread slipping from her hands. Luke caught her before she hit the ground. She was cold, her body so light it felt like holding a sack of dry bones. "Hey, stay with me," he said, his voice softer now. Her eyes fluttered as she tried to speak again, but no words came, just a whisper of breath, then silence. He looked around the barn, unsure what to do. If he called the patrol, they'd take her, maybe even punish her. If he left her here, she'd die before morning. His jaw tightened. He wasn't a hero, just a farmer, but he couldn't walk away, not from this carefully. He lifted her into his arms and carried her toward his house. She was lighter than she should be, like someone who hadn't eaten in days inside. He placed her on the old couch near the fire. He wrapped her in a blanket, turned up the heat, and checked for injuries. No blood, but plenty of bruises, and her feet were bare. Cut from walking on rocks. He sat beside her, watching as her breathing steadied. Her silver eyes opened slightly, blinking at the light. She looked at him, not with fear, but with something else, something close to trust. "Name," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Zara." Luke nodded. "I'm Luke," he said, handing her a cup of warm water. She took it with shaking hands and drank slowly. Then her eyes closed again, exhausted but calm. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the fire. Questions filled his mind. Where did she come from? What happened to her? Who were her children? And why did he feel like his life had just changed forever? Outside, the wind howled, but inside the room there was peace. The alien woman, Zara, slept wrapped in warmth she hadn't known in a long time. And Luke, the man who had once lived alone with only soil and silence, now had a stranger in his home. And something deep inside told him, this was only the beginning. The fire crackled softly in the old stone hearth. Zara's breathing had slowed, her chest rising and falling gently under the blanket. Luke sat in his worn chair across from her, watching with careful eyes. He wasn't sure what he had just done, but something inside him told him it was right. He hadn't seen someone look so empty in a long time, not even during the food shortages after the last colony war. Her face, even while sleeping, carried pain, deep pain, like someone who had seen too much and carried it alone. The bread she had stolen still sat on the table, untouched since he brought her in. He thought about throwing it away, but instead, he broke a piece and set it next to her with a glass of water. Let her eat when she wakes, he thought. She needs it more than I do. Suddenly she stirred, groaning softly. Her eyes blinked open again, silvery and tired, but alert now. She looked around quickly, like someone waking up in a strange place. Then she saw Luke and she froze. "You're safe," he said quietly. Holding up both hands, she didn't speak. But she didn't run either. Her body relaxed a little, just enough to sit up halfway. She spotted the bread and reached for it slowly. As if expecting it to be taken away, Luke nodded. "Go ahead." She bit into it carefully, chewing like it was her first real food in weeks. Tears formed again in her eyes, but she didn't cry this time. Just kept eating in silence, piece by piece. until only crumbs were left after a long pause. She looked at him and whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was still rough, but stronger than before. "I didn't mean to steal," she added, her hands folded in her lap. "But I had no choice." Luke leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You said something about children." She looked down, then away, her shoulders trembling. "They're hiding," she said, "in the forest, cold and hungry. They're not mine by blood, but I care for them." "How many?" Luke asked. Zara hesitated, then held up 4 fingers. "Two small, 2 older, all scared," she replied. "We escaped together." "Escaped from what?" She looked him in the eye, and for the first time Luke saw the spark of fire inside her. Not just fear, but defiance. "From the crash," she said. "Our ship. It wasn't supposed to land here. We were running from war, and the leaders abandoned us when they landed." Luke frowned. "You're not part of the main colony ships?" "No," she whispered. "We're from the outer systems, the poor side. The ones nobody helps." She pulled back her blanket slightly, showing scars on her arms, round, dark burns, old but painful to look at. "They marked us," she said we were property, not people." Luke clenched his jaw, trying to keep his emotions in check. He had heard rumors of slave transports in the darker parts of space, but never believed he'd meet someone who escaped one. And now she was here sitting in his home, thin as air, eating his bread and speaking with tears in her voice. "I can't keep them hidden forever," Zara said, looking up again. "They need food, warmth, a place to sleep. We've been moving every night, stealing scraps when we can." Luke rubbed his face, unsure what to do if the local patrols found them. It wouldn't end well. They didn't ask questions. They shot first and asked later. And if word got out that aliens were living in human land, panic would spread fast. Still, something in Zara's voice reached him. She wasn't just surviving, she was protecting, sacrificing herself to feed others. It reminded him of his mother during the hard winters, when she gave him the last piece of bread and told him she'd already eaten. "You're not the only one who's hungry," he finally said. "I get that." Zara's eyes met his again, this time filled with quiet hope. "But I can't let patrols find them," Luke added. "I'd lose everything, this farm, my land, maybe even my life." Zara nodded slowly, understanding. "I don't want to bring you harm," she whispered. "I just want to keep them alive." Luke stood and walked to the window, staring out into the dark woods. The wind blew cold through the trees, and for a second, he imagined 4 little shapes huddled under roots or in hollow logs, waiting for their guardian to return. He turned back to her, his voice low but steady. "If I give you shelter just for now, can you keep them quiet, hidden?" Zara nodded quickly, her hands gripping the blanket tight. "Yes," she said. "We'll be silent, we'll stay out of sight. I promise." "Then bring them tomorrow night," Luke said. "No lights, no noise, and only if it's safe." Her eyes widened, not expecting him to say yes. And for the first time she smiled. Small, fragile, but real. "Thank you, human," she whispered. "You may have just saved 5 lives." Luke looked away, unsure how he felt, but somewhere deep in his chest, something had changed. He didn't just see a thief anymore. He saw someone brave, broken, and trying to hold together a family that wasn't even hers. And he knew this was only the beginning. The next day passed slowly. Luke worked the fields like always. But his mind wasn't on the soil. His thoughts kept drifting to the barn, to the woman sleeping near the fire, and to the promise he made, one that could ruin his life. That night the sky was clear. Stars blinking across the dark, Luke waited on the back porch, a lantern lit low at his feet. He told himself 100 times he shouldn't be doing this. But each time he imagined those children, hungry and hiding, the answer stayed the same. He had to help. Around midnight he heard movement in the trees. Not loud, not rushing, gentle, careful steps. Like someone walking on broken glass, Luke stood, gripping his coat tight, watching the tree line, and then he saw her. Zara stepped out first, her blanket wrapped like a cloak around her. Behind her came 4 small shapes, eyes wide, heads turning in every direction. They looked like children, but not human children. Their skin was pale, almost glowing in the moonlight, with soft patterns like faint tribal lines across their arms and cheeks. Each had small bags tied with string and cloth scraps, holding what little they owned. Luke stepped forward slowly, not wanting to scare them. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe here." Zara nodded, holding the smallest child's hand. "This is Lena," she whispered, "and this is Ral, and the 2 older ones are Mira and Jarn." Lena looked barely 6. Her eyes large and tired, Ral hid behind Zara's legs. Gripping the edge of her blanket, Mira and Yarn stood straight, protective, like they were ready to fight if anything went wrong. Luke opened the barn door, the smell of hay and old wood welcoming them inside. "I've cleared out a space," he said, pointing to the corner. "There's blankets, water, and some food." Zara nodded gratefully, guiding the children in. They moved quietly, almost like ghosts, not making a sound. It broke Luke's heart a little. Kids weren't supposed to move like that. They were supposed to laugh, run, make noise, not act like the world was hunting them. Once inside, the children settled down on the hay-covered floor. Zara handed each a small chunk of bread and sat beside them. They ate slowly, no one asking for more. No one complaining, even the smallest one. Lena ate with both hands as if scared someone might take it away. Luke watched from the doorway, unsure of what to say. "You can stay here for now," he said quietly. "But if anyone from the village comes by, you have to stay hidden, no lights, no talking, no movement." Zara nodded. "We understand." Then, after a pause, she added, "We've been hiding since the crash. We know how to disappear." Luke frowned. "You shouldn't have to." Zara looked up at him, her eyes calm but sad. "But we do," she said. "We always have." Later that night, Luke returned to the house. He left the barn door unlocked, just in case they needed to run again. But deep inside, he hoped they wouldn't. He sat by the fire, thinking about what Zara said about being marked. Being chased, being thrown away like trash, and now she was taking care of children who weren't even hers. He couldn't understand why, but he respected it deeply. The next morning, he brought fresh water and boiled potatoes to the barn. The kids looked brighter, still quiet but less afraid. Zara helped him carry a few things, and together they cleaned a corner of the barn to make it feel more like a home. That's when he saw the drawings on the wall near the hay. Mira had used a piece of charcoal to sketch something. Stars, a round ship, and a group of tall aliens with eyes like hers. Below them was a fire and figures running from it. Luke pointed, "Is that your village?" Mira looked at Zara, unsure. Zara gave a small nod and Mira whispered, "It's where we came from." Before they burned it, Luke felt a chill in his chest. These kids weren't just lost, they were survivors. And now they were on his land, under his roof. The world would call him a traitor if they knew. But when he looked at Mira's sketch again, he didn't feel fear or regret. He felt purpose that night before sleep. Zara sat beside him on the porch. "I know this won't last forever," she said. "But for now they feel safe." Luke nodded. "Then we make it last as long as we can." And in that quiet moment, under the stars, the two of them made a silent promise to protect what little peace they had found, to keep the hidden ones safe no matter the cost, because sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules, and sometimes the ones who hide in the shadows are the ones who need the light the most. The mornings felt different now. Luke wasn't just waking up to check fences or feed chickens. He had guests, quiet, secret guests, hiding in his old barn. Every sunrise brought a question to his heart. Was he doing the right thing? Or digging a hole he couldn't climb out of? Still, when he walked into the barn and saw those small eyes light up at the sight of food, he knew his answer. Zara greeted him with a tired but grateful smile. The kids stayed close to her, but they no longer shrank back when Luke entered. They were still afraid, but not of him. That small change meant more than he could explain. He handed over a small basket, potatoes, boiled eggs, and slices of soft bread. Zara divided the food carefully, giving the most to the little ones and taking the smallest share for herself. Luke didn't comment, but he noticed. "You don't eat much," he said, watching her pass a piece of bread to Mira. "I eat enough," Zara replied softly. "They need it more than I do." Luke sat on an old barrel nearby. "I brought more blankets too," he said, pointing to the bundle under his arm. "Rain's coming tonight." Zara looked up sharply. "Are the roofs okay?" Luke smiled slightly. "Leaky, but not bad enough to drown." He paused, then added, "If you want, I can help seal it later." "Make it warmer in here." Zara nodded, her eyes softer now. "Thank you." Later that afternoon, the clouds rolled in. Luke worked quickly, covering the weak spots on the barn roof with extra sheets of metal and tarp. Zara helped him, climbing nimbly despite her thin frame. She handed him tools, held things steady, and followed instructions without complaint. Rain started to fall just as they finished. They climbed down and stood under the edge of the barn. Catching their breath, water dripped from the tarp, but inside the barn stayed dry. The kids peeked out from their corner. Smiling when they saw no leaks, Zara turned to Luke and said, "They think you're a hero now." Luke chuckled. "I'm just a tired farmer with a ladder." That night, they all shared a simple stew Luke had made. He brought it in a big pot, along with wooden spoons and old metal bowls. The children ate eagerly, their faces brighter than he had ever seen. Lena climbed into Zara's lap, holding her bowl close. Ral sat beside Mira and whispered jokes that made her smile. Even Jarn, the most serious one, laughed when Luke made a silly face. Luke hadn't heard this kind of laughter in years. It wasn't loud or wild, it was gentle, healing, real. And it filled the barn like a song that had been waiting too long to be sung. After the meal, the kids curled up in their blankets. Zara tucked each one in, her hands moving carefully, lovingly. Luke watched from the corner, something tightening in his chest. "You're not their mother," he said softly. "But you act like it." Zara looked up at him, brushing Lena's hair back. "I was never allowed to have children," she said. "But when the ship fell and everything burned, these four found me in the wreckage." She smiled faintly. "They chose me and I chose them." Luke nodded slowly, understanding more now than ever. She wasn't just protecting them. She was all they had. Back in the house, Luke couldn't sleep. The rain tapped gently on the windows, and the fire burned low. He sat by the table, staring at the empty bowl he used for stew. One bowl, one spoon, one meal at a time. That's how it started, but how long could it last? How long before someone noticed extra food missing from the market? How long before one of the kids was seen near the edge of the woods? He knew the patrols didn't care about reasons. They saw aliens and thought danger. No questions asked, Luke had seen it before. During the last crackdown, innocent or guilty, it didn't matter. A raid would destroy everything still. When he remembered the way Lena giggled into her bowl, or the way Jarn relaxed near the fire, he knew he'd do it all again. They were just kids, and Zara, she was more human than most humans he knew. The next morning, he left a sack of flour, a few apples, and a small solar lantern in the barn. He didn't say much, just smiled, waved, and walked back to his house. One meal at a time, one quiet act of kindness. That was how hope grew, and deep in his heart, Luke felt it. This wasn't just his farm anymore, it was a refuge, a place where the unwanted were no longer alone. The village market buzzed with noise and motion. Vendors shouted their prices, children ran between stalls, and neighbors traded both food and gossip. Luke walked with his hat low, carrying a basket of eggs to sell. But his mind wasn't on trade today. Every step he took, he felt eyes on him. Whispers drifted in the air, soft, sharp, and dangerous. "Someone's been taking from my field," one farmer said, shaking his head. "Gone again." Another muttered, "Last night, half a sack of grain." "Just gone," Luke paused, pretending to check tomatoes. But his heart beat faster. "They're saying aliens," the butcher grunted to a friend. Tracks in the mud didn't look human. Tracks? Yeah, 4 toes, thin prints. Same as them borderland species. Luke clenched his jaw. He hadn't told Zara, but he saw the same prints outside his fence 3 nights ago. He had hoped they were just his imagination. But now the village was watching and waiting. "Should call in the patrols," someone else said, loud enough for others to hear. "Last time we ignored it, people got hurt." A chill ran through Luke's spine. He paid quickly and left the market, walking fast toward his transport cart. The moment he was away from the crowd, he breathed out. They were close, too close. And if the wrong person followed those prints? That night the sky was dark, no stars. Just thick clouds and a rising wind. Luke didn't wait till morning. He drove straight back, pulled the cart into the shed, and went directly to the barn. Zara was sewing scraps of cloth into something like a curtain. She looked up as he entered, sensing the tension in his steps. "They're talking," Luke said. "They've noticed the missing food. They've seen the prints." Zara's face tightened. Ral, who had been playing with stones on the floor, stopped and looked up. Even Mira stood slowly, her eyes sharp and alert. "We didn't take from others," Zara said. "Only what you gave us." "I know," Luke replied. "But they don't care. They just want something to blame." A flash of fear passed through the children's eyes. They remembered the last time patrols came. How they ran, how others didn't make it. "I can't protect you if they come," Luke said quietly. "Not with force, not with weapons," Zara nodded slowly. "We will hide deeper if needed." "No," Luke said. "They'll search everywhere. I have another idea. He led her to the back of the barn, where a trapdoor hid a narrow staircase. It led to the old cellar, used long ago for storing wine and tools. Now it was mostly dust and spiderwebs, but it could still serve. "It's not comfortable," Luke said, "but it's hidden, and sound doesn't travel well from below." Zara stepped down, looking around. "It will do," she whispered. "We've stayed in worse." Over the next hour, Luke and Zara moved blankets, water jugs, and some dried food down into the cellar. The children followed, wide-eyed but silent. They understood. This was safety, even if it was dark, even if it was small. Before leaving, Zara touched Luke's arm. "Thank you," she said. Again and again, Luke gave a small nod. "Stay down there until I say otherwise." He closed the trap door, stacked hay and crates above it, and swept the floor to erase the footprints. By the time morning came, the barn looked empty. Quiet, normal. But outside, trouble was already on the road. 2 patrol ships hovered above the village by noon, their silver frames casting long shadows over the fields. Villagers gathered, pointing at the sky, murmuring about raids, safety, and strangers. Luke kept to his work, eyes low, hands busy. He saw the officers walking down paths, scanning fences, questioning farmers. One of them pointed toward Luke's land. His neighbor, a man with a thick beard and a jealous heart, said something to them quietly. Luke's stomach sank. That evening, a black-clad officer knocked on his door. "You've been seeing anything strange?" The officer asked, straight-faced. Luke shook his head. "No more than the usual crows." The officer didn't smile. "Tracks near your fence, unusual prints." "Could be wolves," Luke offered. "Plenty in the woods this time of year." The officer stared a moment longer, then nodded once. "If you see anything, report it," he said. "We don't want trouble out here." Luke watched him leave, then turned toward the barn. Zara and the children waited beneath him, silent and still. He didn't say a word, just walked past the patrol and back into the silence, because now every step, every whisper, every meal came with risk, but also with purpose. And no matter how close the trouble came, Luke knew he wouldn't stop. Not when lives depended on one man's silence, and not when the smallest of them had finally started to smile again. The wind carried a strange hum that morning. Luke stood in the field, shovel in hand, when he first heard it. A low, distant sound like thunder, but steady and mechanical. He looked up and saw 2 black patrol ships slicing through the sky. The enforcers had come. He dropped the shovel and walked fast to the barn. The children were still hidden below, and Zara sat near the trap door, listening carefully. "They're coming," Luke said in a low voice. "Stay completely silent." "Not a single sound," Zara nodded, her face pale, her arms already around the children. She didn't ask questions. She didn't panic, she just held them close. Luke closed the trapdoor and piled crates and hay on top of it like before. Then he left the barn and tried to act normal. He checked the water pump, wiped sweat from his forehead, and went to feed the chickens. But he couldn't stop glancing at the sky. The ship circled once, then landed near the village edge. A dust cloud rose as heavy boots touched the ground. 4 officers stepped out, helmets shining, eyes hidden behind dark visors. They didn't walk, they marched. Luke saw them approach the neighbors first. They questioned old Gil about his missing tools, searched the storage shed behind Mrs. Halver's house. Then they turned toward Luke's farm. He felt his chest tighten. Every step they took toward his gate felt heavier than the last. He wiped his hands on his shirt and walked to meet them. "You Luke Branner?" the lead officer asked. Luke nodded. "Yeah, that's me." "We're searching for fugitives," the officer said, holding out a tablet. "Several non-human individuals escaped from a crash site 3 sectors east." Luke kept his face calm. "That's a long way from here." "Exactly," the officer said. "And we tracked movement heading this direction." Another officer stepped around him and walked toward the barn. Luke moved quickly, blocking the path. "Just animals in there," he said firmly. "And storage." The officer didn't answer, just tilted his head and scanned the structure. "We'll check it anyway," he said, brushing past. Luke followed, sweat on his neck now cold in the wind. Inside the barn, the officer looked around, shining a flashlight into corners, lifting crates, tapping the walls. He paused near the back, where the trapdoor lay hidden beneath hay. Luke held his breath. The officer stepped forward, closer, then stopped. He glanced down, then at Luke. "You clean up in here often?" Luke forced a casual shrug. "Every other day. Dust gets bad if you let it build." The officer grunted, turned away, and walked out without lifting the trapdoor. Luke didn't move until the sound of his boots faded. Outside, the lead officer handed Luke a scanner.
Standard procedure, he said. Just a bioscan?
Make sure you're not hiding anything behind a genetic blocker. Luke placed his hand on the device. Trying not to show his shaking fingers, it beeped once, then showed a green light. Clear, the officer said, then narrowed his eyes. If you hear anything at all, you report it. Luke nodded. Of course, the officer leaned in slightly. You help them. And it's not just them we take down. Luke met his eyes. Calm but cold. I understand. The officers turned and left, walking back toward their ship without another word. Luke didn't move until they were in the air again, the hum fading behind the hills. Only then did he return to the barn. He pulled the crates aside, lifted the trapdoor, and looked down. Zara stared up at him, her arms still around the children. No one had moved, not even once. It's okay, Luke whispered. They're gone. Zara climbed out first, her knees shaky. The children followed, blinking in the soft light. They almost found us, she said, her voice trembling. But they didn't, Luke replied, because you stayed calm. Zara looked around, her eyes wet. This can't go on, she whispered. They'll come back, and next time, they might open the floor. Luke sat on a crate, rubbing his face. I know, he said, but I won't let them take you, not while I still have breath. Zara looked at him, confused. Why? She asked, why risk everything for us? Luke didn't answer at first. He just looked at Lena, who was holding Mira's hand, at Raoul, who clutched a blanket like a shield, at Yarn, who stood in the corner, pretending not to be scared, and then he said, because I've seen monsters and they didn't look like you. Zara's lip trembled, her eyes wide. You see us? She asked. Luke nodded. I do, that night. The fire burned lower than usual. The food was eaten in silence, and even the children whispered instead of playing. But there was one thing stronger than the fear that hung in the air. The bond between them, forged not by blood but by kindness, by protection, and by the simple choice to care. And as the stars returned to the sky, Luke knew the final choice was coming soon. He had bought them time, but time was running out. The morning sky was gray, heavy with clouds that threatened rain. Luke stood at the edge of his porch, staring out across the fields. His hands were rough, his boots muddy, but his heart felt heavier than both. Zara and the children were still hidden below the barn. The cellar was quiet, the food supplies running low, and the village was growing louder with suspicion. 2 more patrols had flown overhead during the week. No questions asked this time, just quiet scans, slow circles, and the feeling of pressure building. Luke knew it was only a matter of time. The next knock on his door wouldn't be a question. It would be an order. He couldn't wait anymore that night. He did something no one expected. He went into town, walked straight to the local hall, and stood on the main platform. People stared, surprised to see the quiet farmer standing in front of the crowd. Even the village leader blinked, unsure. I have something to say, Luke said, his voice calm but strong. The room quieted. I know some of you have been hearing rumors, he began, about missing food, strange footprints, patrol ships circling our skies. Murmurs spread through the room, heads nodding, eyes narrowing. Well, the rumors are true, Luke continued, but not in the way you think. He looked around, meeting each gaze with steady eyes. There are aliens hiding in our land, children, orphans, refugees from a crashed ship, abandoned by their own. Gasps echoed, and someone shouted, You've been hiding them? I've been feeding them, Luke replied, sheltering them because they were starving and afraid because they had nowhere else to go. They're dangerous. One man shouted from the back. No, Luke said firmly. They're not. He pulled out a drawing, one Mira had sketched on scrap paper. It showed her holding Lena's hand under the stars. He held it up, showing the room. They laugh, they cry. They play just like our kids, he said. They're not soldiers, not criminals, just lost souls. Another woman spoke. But what about the patrols? What if they punish us? Luke took a deep breath. They already punished them, he said. Left them to die. Chased them from the woods like animals, he paused. And now we have a choice, turn our backs, or be better. Silence filled the hall. Even the village leader looked shaken. Luke stepped down, walked out without another word, the drawing still in his hand. The next day, everything changed. A small group of villagers came to his farm, not with weapons, but with food, clothes, and blankets. They didn't speak much, just nodded and placed the items near the barn. One man said, If they're children, they deserve warmth. Another whispered, I lost my son in the war, maybe I can help now. Luke opened the cellar and told Zara. At first, she didn't believe him. People are helping us? She asked, her voice trembling. Luke smiled. Not everyone, but enough. The children climbed out slowly, blinking in the sunlight. Lena ran to the new shoes someone left behind. Ral hugged a fresh loaf of bread like a treasure. Mira handed out pieces to the others, and even Yarn smiled. The patrol came again 2 days later. But this time, they were met with resistance, not with violence, but with voices. The villagers stood beside Luke, in front of the barn, blocking the path. They're under our protection now, the village leader said. These refugees are part of our community. The officers scanned the crowd, saw the determination, and after a long silence, they turned and left. No orders, no arrests. Just silence and defeat. That night, a fire burned in the center of the village. Luke sat with Zara beside it, the children sleeping nearby. Mira drew on the ground with a stick, sketching stars. Zara turned to him, her voice soft. You changed everything, she said. Luke shook his head. No, you did. When you chose to trust a stranger, she smiled, eyes full of light. You gave us hope, she whispered, and now, others see us too. The stars above blinked like distant candles. The night no longer felt cold, because kindness had grown from one heart. And that one heart had changed a village, changed a future, not with weapons, not with power, but with one loaf of bread, one hidden cellar, and one choice to care.